Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for February 9th through 15th. This week I read 4 books, I watched 3 shows, and I listened to 2 books. Although most of the books I physically read this week were for the 6th round of Contemporaryathon, I also read a novella just before the readathon started, and that was Caroline's Heart by Chant. This is a book set in 1885 about Roy, who is a cowboy and has a little bit of a secret, and then also a witch he meets who he immediately takes a shine to. Roy didn't grow up thinking that he was going to be a cowboy working on a ranch. He grew up in a family that thought that he was a girl, so he left that family to be the man that he knows he is. And when he meets this witch, he kind of wants to be her apprentice because that seems like a much better gig than working on a ranch. Not to mention, she is very pretty and he would like to get to know her better. This witch, however, is working on a very powerful spell, something to do with a previous lover named Caroline. And this is a very short novella, so that's all I'm going to tell you about the actual plot. I absolutely adored this. I'm not surprised by that. I really enjoyed the only other thing I've read by Chant, which was Peter Darling, which is a trans retelling of Peter Pan. I found the magic really interesting. I enjoyed how their backstories came about and how they slowly told each other about who they are. And although I'm not one to just pick up Western after Western after Western, seeing a little bit of it every once in a while is a lot of fun. I mean, who doesn't like seeing a fight scene in a saloon? Next for Contemporaryathon, I picked up All the Better Part of Me. This is a story about a protagonist who is working as an actor in London, but finds himself often flirting with his best friend back in Seattle. This checks a lot of boxes for me. It's a bi coming of age story where a person who is not, in their teens figures out finally that they're bi, which hits home for me because I didn't come out till I was 30. This also has the theater and acting element to it. It takes place both in London and Seattle, which are cities that I have visited. In fact, cities I will probably be in this year, both of them, because I'm going to London in April, and I tend to go to Seattle for Geek Girl Con every year, so I'll probably go in October, November. I really enjoyed the honesty of the romances in this, and this went in a completely different direction than I assumed it would based on the little bit of it I knew going into it, and I really enjoyed all of that aspect. All of that is a little bit of a spoiler and I don't really want to give it away, but the way that that major twist was handled was absolutely fantastic. We don't often see the narratives of men wanting to take responsibility in the way that this protagonist did, and in fact thriving upon it and absolutely craving to do so, and I just adored seeing that. And then on the flip side, we don't often get to see the perspective of women who chose what Fiona chose, so I was very excited to see all of that. This book is very good. It's wonderful, it's romance, and then so much more, so definitely check it out. Next I read the Subtweet by Vivek, Shraya. This was an e-arc that I got from NetGalley because this isn't out I think until maybe April. This is about these 2 musicians. One is a full-time musician and one is kind of a hobby musician, and the hobby musician does a cover of the actual musician's song and it's better than the original. Because of that, the cover blows up and the hobby musician wants to meet up with the actual musician so they can just basically meet each other because she's a really big fan, and they have this friendship that eventually falls apart because of a subtweet. This book is about friendships, it's about representation, it's about jealousy, it's about all sorts of different dynamics that are going on in the Canadian music scene because this was set in Toronto. And we do get the perspectives of 4 different women who play into this event in one way or the other, and I really enjoyed seeing this from different sides. It really talked about cancel culture and calling in versus calling out and the white savior, and it talked about so many things, and that made me so happy. Especially because it went at this without giving definite answers, because obviously answers are going to be different for every situation. Finally, because Allie from Hardback Hoarder absolutely loves this book and I actually made my library buy it, specifically so I could read it, I read The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. I will tell you right up front because it is apparent from page 1 that this is a sexual assault book, so if that is a trigger warning or if you have trigger warnings around that, steer clear. You don't have to read this and that is okay. However, what makes this remarkable, and I think the reason that Allie also really jives with this book, is it tells the story of a rape and its repercussions for this very young protagonist over a very long amount of time, and we really get to see what that event does to her. And she reacts in ways that we don't necessarily see in other literature, but are completely valid ways to react to a trauma like this. Trigger warnings obviously for rape, abuse of a minor, grooming tendencies, self-destructive addictive tendencies, suicidal ideation. This book has a lot of heavy subject matter, but is beautifully written and shows a perspective that we don't often see, and I like to see as many perspectives as possible about a situation. On to what I watched this week, the first thing being RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars Season 4. I watched the end of that season. And I'm also excited because I think Season 11 of the regular version of RuPaul is finally coming to Canada on the 1st of March, so I will get to that. This season ended in a controversial way. I don't know how I feel about it. I kind of wish that it would have just gone one way or the other. If you've seen the season, you'll know what that means. Also, because of the structure of this competition, my top pick went home well before the final four, which is not how I wanted that to go, obviously. However, the very top queens really did deserve to be there, so I was okay with that. And I always just enjoy seeing people do what they love, they're passionate about, and they're good at. This week we also continued watching the second season of The Expanse. Again, we're past the part where I read in the books what was happening, so every once in a while I have to be like, what political thing is happening right now? And I have to actively suspend my disbelief because every once in a while I start to question the space physics. And I don't personally know enough about the science to really be questioning things like this, so I don't know why my brain turns on. However, Chad actually edits space videos for a very large YouTube channel that talks about space, at least 2 or 3 videos a week. So from doing that, he has picked up a lot of the science and he can actually kind of explain some things to me, which makes for some interesting side conversation, but that means that we also end up pausing the show quite often instead of just focusing on the characters. Finally, my roommate and I also watched the first episode of the 40th season of Survivor, and it was a 2-parter and it was fantastic. This season is called Winners at War because every single person on the cast has won Survivor at least once before. Of course, Sandra has already won twice. Spoilers for previous seasons of Survivor. If you watch this and you haven't watched all the seasons, you're gonna see a few people that you don't know. That is definitely the thing for me. However, the thing with me is I can watch a season of Survivor and completely forget who won, so it's fine. I can definitely go back and watch these seasons where these people came from and be like, that guy looks familiar, I don't know why, and then be like, oh yeah, that's the guy I'm seeing on the current season. That's why. However, there are definitely some favorites that have come back. For example, Ethan played when I was in high school, and now he's back. And I'm interested to see how this new game mechanic of the fire tokens go, because they could either be played really, really well, or they could be just used for comfort items. We won't know until we kind of watch it and find out. There is also the Edge of Extinction component, so if you're voted off, you go off to this separate island where people have been voted off go to, and you have a chance to get back in the game. If it's anything like before, there's only going to be one person from that group of people who gets the chance to come back. Maybe 2, actually, now that I'm thinking of it. I think there were 2 last time. So all in all, I'm intrigued, I'm happy to see some familiar faces back, and I'm happy to see some people fanboying over other people that are playing. It's really funny to watch. On to the books I listened to this week, both of them being middle grade books, the first one being Out of My Mind. This is about a young protagonist who's about 10 years old and has cerebral palsy. So she cannot speak, she's very limited in the movements she can make, but she absolutely loves words. From the moment she was born, she's basically been collecting words. She's very, very bright, but people in her day-to-day life don't know this because she doesn't have a way to communicate it. However, there are people in her life who believe in her. She has 2 very loving and capable parents. She has this person next door who babysits her, who has always pushed her to learn as much as she can, try as much as she can, has never given her an easy ride, which is just fantastic. And as far as school goes, it's been an up and down ride because they'll get a new teacher every few years, and some of the teachers are really great and some of the teachers are not. However, around the time of this book, everything just kind of aligns. She has a really good teacher, she has a really good aide. They look into ways to make it so that she can be able to communicate with everybody else. And then that turns into the school finding out that she's actually incredibly intelligent, and she tries out for her school's quiz team. This is a really big deal because people in her 5th grade class in particular really want to make it into the quiz team and then on to the competition, which is televised, and then you go to Washington, and if you win that, you get a big trophy, you get to be on one of the morning programs. It's a whole big thing. She wants to apply for it, and she definitely has the grades to do so. However, some 5th grade kids are little shits, so obviously it's not going to be an easy ride for her. I absolutely adore this book. It was recommended to me by one of my very faithful subscribers, Moonbook, so thank you very much for the recommendation. I actually convinced my in-person book club to read it, so we'll be talking about it not this week, but next week at our book club meeting. So I'm interested to see what everybody else got out of this. This also reminded me of reading Ghost Boy by Martin Pistorius, I believe was the author. Similar circumstance in that he went into a coma and was kind of out of his mind for a very long time, and then came back into being able to think and understand things, so obviously that part is a little bit different, but eventually he was able to build a way to communicate with people, which was wonderful after being trapped in his body, unable to communicate for a very long time. That book is nonfiction and I highly suggest it. Finally, the last book I listened to this week was called Dragons in a Bag. This is about a little boy whose mom drops him off with this stranger one day because she needs to go to court because they're being evicted from their apartment, and this stranger has an interesting occupation and also has a delivery to make of 3 very different creatures. Obviously, based on the title, you know what those creatures are. And this is actually the first in a series that I kind of want to continue because it was adorable. I absolutely fell in love with Jax, our main character. I fell in love with Ma, who is the person that Jax is trying to help deliver these dragons. He has a great best friend who has an interesting little sister, meets a couple of other older characters that are very interesting, and then there's definitely more fantasy elements to it that were very, very cool, and I just think that this is the adventure tale that everybody should read because it was really neat. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit. If you don't feel like leaving a full comment, just leave me your favorite emoji down below, and I will see you very soon. Bye!